So what I'll be looking at today are the top tips around recruitment, and one of the biggest areas that you'd need to have consideration to is that of discrimination. There are 9 protected characteristics which give people protection from discrimination again in the area of recruitment, including the more obvious ones such as sex and race and disability, but also the less obvious ones like sexual orientation or marital status. The Equality and Human Rights Commission have put together a code of practice which sets out best practice in the area of recruitment, and employers are well advised to read this particular code to make sure that they are following best practice and to be aware of the pitfalls, particularly around areas such as job advertisements and interviews. In the area of job adverts, what you want to do is to make sure that you avoid any discriminatory language, and that can be the less obvious language such as looking for somebody that is energetic, or using words to describe jobs such as waitress when actually it's waiting staff and not particularly defined to one gender. The other area is in interviews, that you want to make sure that you don't ask questions that are discriminatory, particularly in the area of sex, when you're asking, for example, about childcare arrangements and you only ask questions at that aimed at women. The other area to have particular consideration to, particularly in relation to interviews, is disability. And you need to make sure that reasonable adjustments are made to assist the individual in the interview, particularly in relation to the arrangements for making the interview and the accessibility, but also to make sure that the applicant isn't disadvantaged in any way during the interview.
Once you've decided who you want to offer employment to, you need to consider issuing an offer letter. The offer letter will typically contain the headline terms associated with the offer, but also you ought to consider the conditions that you attach to the offer. So that might include a criminal records check, employment references, and as a mandatory requirement, you need your candidate to have the legal right to work in the UK. You also need to make sure that you expressly include the right to withdraw the offer if the conditions are not met. Once the offer has been accepted by the candidate, then certainly the next consideration is the contract of employment. You firstly would want to consider the type of contract that you would use, and by that we're referring to whether you incorporate a fixed term, whether you look to make it a 0 hours contract, as controversial as those appear to be at the moment. And then once you've decided on that, we would recommend you look at the terms and conditions that certainly provide you with the most protection. And there's some terms and conditions which by law you would have to include in the contract of employment, but there are other conditions that will certainly be more discretionary but will provide the business with better protection, such as confidentiality, intellectual property. And finally, one of the other things we recommend, particularly in the context of recruitment, is a probationary period, something that you can use to measure suitability at that early stage of employment. A lot of the issues that we've discussed during this short video were discussed in more detail during our employment seminar, which is a series of seminars that we've been running focused around the life cycle of employment from the beginning until the end, and we've been providing regular updates on our blog in relation to the seminar, so you can find further information from there, and that's at www.sherrards.com.